Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that the company you trusted with your retirement savings, your career, and your future had been lying to you for years. Not small lies, but billions of dollars worth of carefully constructed deception. That is exactly what happened to tens of thousands of ordinary Americans when one of the most powerful corporations in the world came crashing down. This is the story of WorldCom, a scandal so massive, so calculated, and so devastating that it changed the way the entire world does business. The rise of an empire built on ambition. WorldCom did not start as a corrupt company. It began in 1983 as a modest long-distance telephone provider in Mississippi. Through the 1990s, it grew at a breathtaking pace, swallowing up smaller companies and becoming a dominant force in global telecommunications. By 1998, it had completed a $37 billion acquisition of MCI Communications, a company nearly 3 times its own size. That single deal announced to the world that WorldCom was no longer a regional player. It was a giant. At its peak, WorldCom handled roughly half of all internet and email traffic in the United States. Its CEO, Bernard Ebbers, was celebrated on magazine covers, admired on Wall Street, and considered one of the most brilliant business minds of his generation. He appeared on Forbes lists as one of the wealthiest Americans, with a personal fortune estimated at over $1 billion. Everyone wanted a piece of WorldCom. Investors poured money into its stock, watching it soar to $60 per share. The story of WorldCom seemed like the ultimate American success story, a small company that outworked, outthought, and outgrew everyone else. But behind the glossy press releases and confident earnings calls, a very different story was unfolding. The problem began where these stories often do, with pressure. By the late 1990s, the telecommunications industry was cooling down. Competition was intensifying, and WorldCom's growth was beginning to slow. Wall Street analysts expected double-digit growth year after year. When the numbers stopped cooperating, Ebbers and his executives made a fateful decision. Instead of telling investors the truth, they chose to manufacture it. Senior executives, led by Chief Financial Officer Scott Sullivan, began quietly manipulating the company's financial records. They reclassified ordinary operating expenses, the fees WorldCom paid to lease other companies' phone networks, as long-term capital investments. This one accounting trick made the company appear far more profitable than it actually was. By moving costs off the income statement and onto the balance sheet, they created billions in fake profit. They also raided reserve funds, pulling nearly $3 billion from those accounts and falsely recording them as revenue. The entire scheme was designed to produce one result: to make the stock price look strong while executives, including Ebbers himself, quietly benefited. The whistleblower who refused to look away while the fraud was growing behind closed doors, one woman inside WorldCom began to notice something was deeply wrong. Cynthia Cooper was the vice president of internal audit, and she was not the kind of person who looked away from uncomfortable truths. In early 2002, Cooper and her small team began receiving disturbing signals. A budget analyst named Kim Emmy had already tried to raise concerns years earlier, warning that company executives were instructing employees to misclassify labor costs. Emmy had blown the whistle to senior management. The practice was halted, but Emmy was fired for asking too many questions. His warnings, however, were not forgotten. When Cooper's team started following the trail, they uncovered something staggering. Deep inside WorldCom's accounting systems, they found entries for over $1 billion in so-called prepaid capacity, a term that none of the accountants in the company could even define. There were no invoices, no receipts, no supporting documents of any kind. Just entries that made the company appear profitable when it was hemorrhaging losses. Cooper's team worked in secret, often late at night, deliberately avoiding the attention of senior management. They knew that if the right people found out what they were doing, the investigation might disappear, along with their jobs. What they uncovered was not just a bookkeeping error. They found over $3.8 billion in fraudulent accounting entries. When they presented their findings to the board's audit committee, the reaction was shock. The external auditors at Arthur Andersen, the same firm already destroyed by its role in the Enron scandal, had reviewed WorldCom's books and found nothing wrong. In June 2002, WorldCom made a public confession. It had overstated its earnings by nearly $4 billion. Later investigations would reveal the full extent of the fraud to be over $11 billion, making it the largest accounting fraud in American history at that time. The company's stock price, once valued at over $64 a share, collapsed to 9 cents. WorldCom filed for bankruptcy. About 17,000 employees lost their jobs. Retirement savings disappeared overnight. And just like that, the empire was gone. The fallout that reshaped an entire system. What happened after WorldCom's collapse was not just a legal reckoning, it was a complete transformation of how corporations operate in America and beyond. Bernard Ebbers, once celebrated as a visionary, was convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and filing false documents. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, one of the stiffest sentences handed down in a corporate fraud case. CFO Scott Sullivan also pleaded guilty and cooperated with prosecutors, helping to build the case that sent Ebbers to prison. Arthur Andersen, the once mighty accounting firm that had audited WorldCom's fraudulent books while simultaneously being implicated in the Enron scandal, was effectively destroyed. The firm surrendered its accounting license, and 85,000 employees worldwide lost their jobs. The domino effect was catastrophic. Cynthia Cooper, the internal auditor who refused to stay quiet, was named one of Time magazine's Persons of the Year in 2002, alongside Enron whistleblower Sharon Watkins and FBI agent Colleen Rowley. These three women were collectively called the whistleblowers. Recognized for their moral courage at a time when powerful institutions were failing ordinary people, their actions mattered, not just for justice, but for the future. Congress responded to the WorldCom and Enron scandals by passing the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002, one of the most sweeping corporate governance reforms in American history. The law created the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, established strict new rules for auditor independence, required top executives to personally certify the accuracy of financial statements, and introduced serious criminal penalties for white-collar fraud. Before Sarbanes-Oxley, the system operated largely on trust. After WorldCom, that trust had to be replaced with accountability. The story of WorldCom is not just a cautionary tale about corporate greed. It is a story about what happens when ambition outpaces integrity, when the pressure to perform destroys the willingness to be honest, and when the gatekeepers of accountability fall asleep at their posts. It is also a story about courage, about one woman in a quiet Mississippi town who looked into a system designed to silence her and refused to walk away. Every investor who reads a corporate report today, every employee who can report fraud anonymously, every executive who signs a financial statement knowing the legal consequences of lying. They are all living in a world reshaped by what happened at WorldCom. The lesson is permanent. No company is too big to be held accountable, and no fraud, no matter how carefully constructed, stays hidden forever.